Hello, everyone. My name is Mark Lichtenwalter. I am the host of the former podcasts, The Kingdom of God or Nothing, and Fundamentally Mormon, and also Zion's Redemption Radio Network. My YouTube is God is my compass, or no, it's youtube.com/user/, God is my compass if you want to follow me there. And I am the admin of several uh, Facebook groups. Fellowship of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints is one. My most popular one has 10,500 people in it, somewhere around there. um, and that's LDS, Last Days Prophecy and Gospel Discussion. So if you really enjoy this content, you can find me posting there all the time. Um, I'm also Red Pill Mormon on TikTok. So anyway, I wanted to read the Ensign to the Nations Bible Edition table of contents today, and I've read all of these books in my podcasts um, multiple times, but now we have it all in one book, which is very long and very thick, as you can see. Um, so I'm going to start reading them onto YouTube one page at a time. My content, The Kingdom of God or Nothing, somebody hacked my podcasts, and you can find them on YouTube, but you can't listen to most of them are gone. Somebody went and deleted all the audio files. And then the same thing happened again with Zion's Redemption Radio Network, or Fundamentally Mormon. So, and that was a podcast that I did. You can hear some of them, but most of them are deleted once again. So, anyway, I'm going to be just reading these on YouTube now. I do miss the Blog Talk Radio website that is no longer available to use because I was able to have guest call-in numbers and ran it like an online radio show with a studio and everything, and that was fun. And I had a feeling that there was another attack coming, and I was able to screen record off of iTunes a lot of my old podcasts, but I wasn't able to get them all. And then I was able to transfer a lot of them over to Sprecher. But like I said, I wasn't able to get them all. So some of them are lost, but I was able to save some before before everything went south and they got deleted. So anyway, but the table of contents for this book is, like I said, as it is translated correctly, is the first book that we're going to be reading. And that starts on page 1. Blood Atonement is the second book that we will read, and that'll be on page 53 in the Bible edition. Of course, there's several pages on each page, so anyway, oh, and by the way, you can go and find all of these books to read for free online at ogdenkraut.com. That's OGDENKRAUT.com. I think there's like 70 something uh, books that Ogden wrote, all about restoration theology. So, Blood Atonement's the second one, and that goes over the Blood Atonement and also the signs and the penalties and what blood atonement actually is and what it is not. And that's on page 53. And then the next book is Calling and Election, which goes over um, evidences for callings and elections, and tons of quotes about that subject, which I really enjoy. The next book, the fourth book, is called Christ in the Crucifixion. Pretty easy to understand what that one is about. That's on page 175. The Church and the Gospel, going over the differences between the church and the gospel on page 209, and then the church and the priesthood, and going over the differences between the church and the priesthood. And if you think that they are the same, they are not. All right, compromise and concessions goes over the compromises and the concessions that the church has had to go through because of Babylon the Great and its influence upon the church. The next book on page 413 is Fasting for Health and Happiness. The next book starts on page 451, and that's the Four Crafts, speaking about the crafts of, let me think. It's been a while since I've read this book, but priestcraft. I can't remember. Let's see, 451. That's probably just easy to look it up real quick here. 451. It's actually a really good book, and I really did enjoy reading it. So, Doctor Craft is the first chapter. Lawyer Craft is the second chapter. Priestcraft and what that is in the third chapter or section, and Kingcraft, and then there's a conclusion after that. So, all right, so that's the Four Crafts. The Gathering of Israel is the next book on page 513, and that talks about what the gathering is and what it is not, what it was and what it became, which is, there's a big difference. All right, the next book is called The Gift of Dreams, so that talks about a ton of dreams and stuff that are visionary and prophetic, and they're all really good books. Okay, The Gift of Tongues and what that is and what that is not, and that's a really good book. They're all so good. The Holy Priesthood Volume 1 starts on page 647, and then Volume 2 starts on page 701, and like they go through different topics, and like it took me like 6 months to get through all 4 volumes, or all 6 volumes. Volume 3 starts on page 759, Volume 4 on page 807, Volume 5 on 873, and Volume 6 on 943. The book after that is called Jesus Was Married, which is the first book I read by Ogden Kraut back in 2001 or 2, and awesome, excellent book. It's one I've actually read this one many times on my podcasts because I think it's so awesome. And that starts on page 1029. A book about Judas Iscariot starts on page 1055, and then we have the Kingdom of God volume series. Volume 1 is on 1087, Volume 2 is on 1135, and Volume 3 starts on page 1185. Lineage of the Priesthood, which is an excellent book as well. They're all excellent. I shouldn't have to say they're excellent, but there's books that I enjoy reading more than others, but I do enjoy reading them all. So, Men and Monuments of Freedom starts on page 1293, and then one of my other favorite books, and it was a book that one of the first books I read of Ogden Kraut's, an excellent book. It's called Michael Adam. Goes over the Adam God doctrine and how that has changed over time. The next book is a book of facts, and it's just an interesting book, A Model of the Gold Plates, which is on page 1359. And then so the next two are some of my favorites, absolute favorites. Mysteries of Creation. Excuse me. Mysteries of Creation. If you can't wait for me to read these books and you don't find them or you don't want to listen to them, go to ogdenkraut.com and read this book first. It is so good. Mysteries of Creation starts on page 1373, and then 95 Thesis, which goes over the changes, over 100 changes between the foundational early church and the modern church and how things have changed. And yes, they have. And there is over 100 different changes And the vast majority of the text in this book will be quotes from former leaders and scriptures in the early days of the Restoration, and then it'll go into what the modern church believes today, which contradicts the things which the early church believed. That book starts on page 1423. The One Mighty and Strong should be my favorite book, but it is a good book anyway. And that's on page 1485. I shouldn't have to say because they're all so good, but The Only True God starts on page 1521. And then we have a book called Pamphlets, which is a compilation of pamphlets that Ogden Kraut wrote. Um, there's so much to learn there. And that one starts on page 1583. Parallel Paths starts on page 1695, and that is how we see the Constitution being set up and the church being set up and how they have apostatized from the way they were set up over time. Great book. All right, so the next one is called Polygamy in the Bible. And this book is about polygamy in the Bible and sets up why there was polygamy in the Bible. And like all of the things about the polygamy in the Bible, it's a whole book for all of those polygamy deniers out there, and which you people drive me insane because God has revealed to me why plural celestial marriage is required and why it's important, but also why polygamy is also important, and it's not an abomination if God commands it. But unauthorized polygamy is not acceptable unto God. So, and that's something that everybody has to come to on their own. Like God, if there are those that want to live polygamy because it's a tradition of men, and then there's those that want to live polygamy because they have a lustful, carnal heart, and then there are those who want to live polygamy or plural celestial marriage because God has asked us to. And I myself am sealed to two women. Um, I have children with one, and the other one I do not have sex with because that's just not part of that in our lives, and that's fine. I'm not interested in having sex with a ton of people, but it's a really good book nevertheless. Anyway, actually, I just gotta say this: my wife is all I need. Like, and I do need her. I love her so much, and um, if God asked me to live polygamy and to father children with another wife, it would be a very difficult thing for me to do. Um, I don't. My wife tells me so. We're done having children, and we've had 7 children. Well, 2 of them are my stepkids, but they're mine. I love them so much, and I've been their dad since they were 3 and 6. So, of course, like every other child, they all drive me insane, but I love them to death. But we've had, my wife has had 7 kids, and 5 of them are mine, and 2 of them have passed away as infants, which was a hard thing for us to go through. One, we went to see the ultrasound as a family, and his name is Ezekiel John Calvin Lichtenwalter. And we had no idea, but he had passed away in utero, and he was 17 weeks old, and they don't know why. There was no reason for it, but it was heartbreaking because like we're all in there as a family, and we're seeing this little baby, and we were all so excited at first because we saw him. We didn't realize he had passed away. So that was the first I guess you call it miscarriage. Um, and it was very difficult for us. But um, he would be 7 years old, I believe, now. And he was born on May 25th. So, and then the second one, my wife always has a hard time being pregnant. In fact, I hate it when she's pregnant because it scares me to death because she goes through such an ordeal bringing these children into this world, but she would do it again and again and again. If it weren't for what happened with this pregnancy, um, her name was Emma, and my wife started having complications and spent over a month on her back in the hospital with a PICC line in her and trying to keep this baby alive. But my wife's body kept on trying to have her, and um, she would still be alive today if it weren't for how she was born. So they realized that they had to do an emergency C-section, and she was 24 weeks along, and she could have lived. But they were not able to do it quick enough, and Emma started going into the birth canal, even though my wife's cervix had not fully dilated. And so when they cut my wife open to get her out, they had to actually push her out of the birth canal, and which caused bruising all over poor little Emma's body. And they brought her out, and they cut my wife's stomach open in such a way that um, it's not safe for her to have any more children. Emma lived for 13 hours, and my wife held her as she passed away. So that's why we have two children who are not with us, but we love them, and it's really cool. I know this is a video about the table of contents, and I'm telling you about something else. But my daughter, Eliza, the veil is very thin for her, and she has seen Emma and Ezekiel many times. And then my son, my youngest living son, he's 6, Arius, and he used to, when me and my wife were working, one of our really good friends would watch Arius, and one day the babysitter's son was walking past the room and where the toys were, and he heard two voices in the room, and he looked in, and there was two little boys playing, Arius and this other little boy. And he didn't interrupt them, but he went to his mom and he said, "Who's that other little boy that's in there?" And Summer, I won't give you her last name, she says, "Oh, Arius is the only one in there." And her son's like, "No, there's another little boy in there." And they went back and checked, and there was just Arius. Ezekiel was there playing with my son. So two of my kids have gotten to know their brother and sister. Um, and we really miss them. And, somebody who has gone through this with my wife, we always wonder what they would have been like, because we can't imagine our lives without the children that we have and the children that we don't have. We just really wish we got to know them better. So, anyway, so all that off of polygamy in the Bible. Strange, huh? My wife and I have a very good sex life, by the way, so it's not that I'm not interested in being with my wife. It's just that I'm only interested in being with my wife, and I don't mind being sealed up to many women, but it doesn't mean I have to have sex with them. So, anyway, because I understand why plural celestial sealings is right in the eyes of God and why God allows polygamy, and it's not a carnal commandment. So there are very specific reasons for that. Whether people want to accept it or not, I know what God has revealed to me and taught me personally. All right, so Preparation for the Kingdom, uh, pretty good book, and that's on page 1847. And then we have a book called The Priesthood Garment. And I'm actually surprised that they put this in here because they did not put this in their other books, and it is not on the website because it is very sacred. And but it's in this book, and I have read it. And anything that's too sacred, I won't talk about. But I don't think they really talk about anything that's like overwhelmingly secret, or it's just sacred. And yeah, so all right, that's on page 1863. Principles and Personalities. I can't remember what that book's about. I've read it probably 2 or 3 times, but that's on 1875. It's been a long time since I've read that book. Book on rebaptism, which was part of the gospel back in the early days of the Restoration, which was done away with in the modern church, unfortunately. But rebaptism is and it goes through the scriptural accounts of rebaptism. Like, there's a lot. So, like, how is it that Alma had priesthood and but and he was, he didn't have to get reordained or anything, but he got rebaptized because rebaptism is something you have to do ordinances once, but you can do them as many times as you feel you need to, and that includes rebaptism. And in fact, because of the Daniel 12 prophecy, where the man clothed in linen scatters or severs the priesthood of all the holy people in the last days, rebaptism is actually essential to being part of the remnant. So, there's a book on reincarnation, which is a pretty good book, and it goes over where the doctrine comes from and how Satan has twisted it and perverted it. And when I go into this book, and it is on the podcast at Sprecher, and I talk about this in my videos sometimes, multiple mortal probations is a true doctrine. It's one of the mysteries of the kingdom, and this is a good introduction to what reincarnation is, and a little bit about what eternal lives are, but it doesn't go as deep into it as it could. But I've done podcasts, so I mostly read these books, but I read other books as well sometimes, and if I get permission to. And yeah, there's a lot of information out there about this if God gives it to you. You have to be directed to that. But I've done podcasts on that. Anyway, so on page 1999 is a book called The Relief Mine, and that is about John Coyle's relief mine down in Salem, Utah, which I've been to. In fact, God asked me to rededicate that several years ago, and I told him I will if I'm invited because it's on private property. And um, about a year and a half after God told me to do that, out of the blue, somebody calls me up and says, "Hey, we're going to go up to the relief mine. We'd like it if you'd come with us." And I was able to go up there and rededicate the relief mine, and it was kind of cool because there was a woman that went with us, and I didn't know her personally because it was a small group of friends of like another friend. We were invited, but they have other friends, obviously. So anyway, but the veil's very thin for her, and she was just marveling after I rededicated it. And I was able to go into the mine, and there were people there that made sure that nobody came in while I was doing that, because I wasn't going to announce my intentions of doing that. I just I was there. I was invited. God asked me to do something. I did it. Anyway, this individual didn't know what had happened, but she could see angels all over the mountain. Like, she was just, as we were coming down the mountain, she was just marveling about all of the angels that were everywhere. And I know why. And so does my wife, and so did the individuals that uh, guarded the mine while I did what God asked me to do. But she didn't know. Anyway, it was pretty cool. Responses is Ogden Kraut's response to church authorities and leaders, letters that have been sent. That's on page 2059. Seers and Seer Stones is a very good book on seers and seer stones, Urim and Thummim, all of that sort of stuff on page 2205. The Segregation of Israel is on page 2231, and it talks about the segregation of Israel. Pretty easy. The 70s, a book about the 70 apostles and what 70s are actually supposed to do according to the revelations that God has given to Joseph Smith and his church, and how they have changed what the 70s are over time without revelation because of their apostasy. All right, so that's on page 2295. And then the three Nephites, talking about the experiences with the three Nephites, is on page 2349. And then the United Order, a very good book about what that is and how it's been lived in the history of the United Order in the time of the Restoration, on page 2393. And then you have the White Horse Prophecy, which is a very good book, goes over that on page 2457. And then Who Crucified Christ is on page 2513. And then we have compilations, which is another section of this book. And and I haven't read all of these, so I've read some of them though. Autobiographies of Pioneer Women on page 2555. Blessings and Ordinances. So I've read most of these. Actually, I think I've read them all. Oh yeah, I've read all of these. All right, Blessings and Ordinances is on page 2615. Celestial Marriage and what that is on page 2639. The Coming American Revolution is on page 2701. The L. John Nuttall Journal Excerpts on page 2739, and he was the secretary for the first presidency, so there's a lot of really good stuff in there. The Marriage Covenants on page 2829. Military Experiences of People in the Restoration is on, and that's a good book. That's a good book. They're all good. Anyway, that's on page 2909. Missionary Experiences is on page 2941. Paradise, a book about paradise and what that is. Good book, obviously. All good. Ogden Kraut was a servant of God to document the history of the Restoration when the church was really pushing to get rid of this information. So that's why he wrote so much. And that's why God gave him a photographic memory. So, but Paradise, very good book, on page 2959. And then you have Pioneer Journals on page 3003. The pre-existence and what that is, and the scriptural evidence for it, and all the quotes of the scriptures, and a ton of quotes from church leaders in the early days of the church on page 3029. Prophecies of the Latter Days, excellent book, on page 3075. And then you have the Relief Mine 2, which is a second book about the relief mine and the prophecies of John Coyle, on page 3145. And then you have a book on resurrection on page 3215, and then you have a book on the revelations received between the 1880s and the 1890s, or it's actually 1880 to 1890. And like one of them just came out, the 1886 Revelation, and the church has actually recognized that this is a thing. But this was released long before the church ever recognized it, and they tried to cover up, and well, yeah. Anyway, so Revelations 1880 to 1890 is on page 3273, and then Sermons and Writings, Volume 1 on 3291, Volume 2 on 3389, Volume 3 on 3479, and Volume 4 on 3573. And then you have a book called Spirit World Experiences on page 3663, Stories of Faith on page 300, starting on page 3687, Visions of the Latter Days on page 3741, Wilford Woodruff excerpts on page 3773, and The Wit and Wisdom of Heber C. Kimball on page 3839. So, and then you have the index, which goes from 3,893 all the way to 4,321, and then you have the addendum and Ogden Kraut's first sketch of the Ensign to the Nations, pictures of Ogden's patriarchal blessing, and that's on page 4,569. Story of Ogden and Orson Hyde, page 4,570. Ogden's obituary on page 4571. Ogden's funeral remarks on page 4,572. The Kraut family house fire in 1959 is talked about on 4,573. New Year's Eve, Ogden's daughter Nina tells about the fire on page 4,574. And then you have Ogden's journal entries on page 4,576, interview with about the mission without person script, which Ogden did, and he was probably the last one. He claims to be the last one that was sent without person script. Anyway, which is the way it should be, but things change. Anyway, that's on 4587. A History of Apostasies is another entry on page 4,601, and then Letters of Interest. And each of these books are letters that he's sharing with us. Anyway, there's a letter to Church about gay marriage, letter to Max Anderson, letter to the Church about the New World Order, letter to Elder Metcalf, letter to Ruth Servey Skousen's American Heritage Study Group, a letter to Jim Gertson. I'm actually friends with his, I think it's his son. Let's see. New Calling to Teach Young Married Mutual Group, Samuel W. Taylor's article about Ogden, and then William Luckhill's Joseph Smith affidavit. That's interesting. I haven't read that. Joseph Smith lived polygamy, and that's on page 4,659. I don't know if these might be on the website, but I'm not sure because I haven't read a lot of these. Oliver's courtroom testimony, Oliver Cowdery, 4,660. Bruce R. McConkie and Eugene England correspondence talking about the Adam God doctrine, and Bruce R. McConkie knew about it and he lied. So anyway, that's 4,662. A Few Words of Doctrine on Divorce and Marriage by Brigham Young on page 4,673, and then a book about the Carthage Jail on 4,677, and then you've got L. John Nuttall's Journal about blacks in the priesthood. Once again, he was a secretary to the first presidency, and that's on page 4,678. A vision given to Mosiah Hancock, which is a really good one. You can find it online. You don't have to go here to find it, but it's pretty dang good. It matches up with some of what I've been shown personally as well, which is kind of cool because I was shown it, and then later on I was introduced to Mosiah Hancock, and I was like, wow, this guy's got the same information I've been given. Some of it, not all of it, but it's very similar. So, and then artwork by Kevin Krauts on page 400 or 4,682. So let's just go to the very back of this book here. I'm interested to see how many numbered pages there are. 4,682 pages. So it's a lot. Anyway, yeah, I've read the majority of this book here and all of the books that are in it, and I'm excited to take the time to read each of the pages one by one. So my next video on this book will be starting off on page 1 as it is translated correctly, and I'll try to put out a page a day if I can. I get so busy doing the work that I do, and one of the things about driving truck that really sucks is, like, if I do a bunch of stuff in the morning, and like I should already be driving right now, I'm actually in Idaho on Interstate 84 at a port of entry that I slept at last night because I like port of entries and rest areas. I don't like truck stops. A lot of truck drivers are like, I don't want to go sit in the port of entry. Oh, they might get me. And I'm always like, do your pre-trips and you won't have a problem. It's not that hard. And they never have ever bothered me. And so I should knock on this book because it's the only thing that's made from wood close by. But like, they've never bothered me at truck stops. And I do a pretty thorough pre-trip and post-trip inspection all the time, and I write things up when they're broken, and if it's DOT related and out of service related, I will not drive the truck. So I am what truckers should be for the most part. So anyway, thank you for watching this video. It's way longer than I thought it would be. Shared some things personally, which I do from time to time, and I used to like try to not do that, but I've had people tell me, thank you for reading and then just talking about whatever comes to your mind, because there's many times when this individual says that I've answered prayers just by going off topic and just speaking what is coming through me to share with people. So I don't know if somebody needs to see and hear that experience, or the experiences that I've shared, which are not part of the original intent of the video, but or if that'll be something in the future that somebody needs to see. But I just let God speak through me, and if I'm doing something and making these videos and I have an intent in mind, if he puts it upon my heart to speak something else, I will go off on tangents, because I want to be God's servant and his tool to do whatever it is he needs me to do. So, all right, well, thank you everyone. Take care, and may God be with you till we meet again. Goodbye.